Hello, everyone, and welcome into this episode of the Irish NFL Show with me, Colum Cronin. And I am delighted to welcoming a returning guest back to the show, a fellow Corkodian. We said we'd have him back if the Lions made the playoffs. They haven't just made the playoffs; they are in the NFC Championship Game. Gary Murphy, how are you doing, sir?
Hi, Colum. Thanks for having me back. I'm doing great. Not surprisingly, the season of our lives, really. For those of us who've been watching the Lions for as long as I have.
Yeah, the last time you were on, we kind of delved into your history with the sport, your interest in it, and how you became a Lions fan. And obviously, like there were expectations on the Lions going into this year. It was obvious that Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes were building something special. But maybe if we look at the season, like it starts off with that win against the Chiefs, the opening game of the season. But very quickly coming down to earth the following week against the Seahawks. I suppose, like in those kind of, to start the season, like how did you feel as a Lions fan having beaten the Chiefs, but then you lose the home opener to the Seahawks?
Yeah, I mean, for years the Lions could always have a kind of a one-off victory. No, nothing on the scale of beating the defending Super Bowl champions with their sort of generational quarterback, Patrick Mahomes. But as you said, yeah, I mean, there was certainly rumblings in Lions fandom that this year would be different. A lot of it was obviously dependent on how the draft, the players they drafted high would go, the new free agents, and the sort of and how Goff would go. And I think I said to you, as Goff goes, so will the Lions. So that was a great win, obviously on the Thursday night. Won't remember as much with defense as with offense. Brian Branch, their sort of celebrated rookie, had an interception at the start of the second half, a pick six, and they closed it out on defense, stopping Mahomes around midfield when they were a point up in the last 90 seconds or so. And then, of course, you had the sort of the letdown of the Seahawks. Now, the Lions have had trouble with the Seahawks for at least a decade or so. I think they might only have beaten Pete Carroll once. In fact, I'm not even sure if they ever beat Pete Carroll, but he certainly has had their number. And so I got a present of Game Pass from my birthday just before the season started. So I watched pretty much every Lions game. I was away for one this year, and watching that on Game Pass, your heart would sink a little bit. They're ahead. They have a fumble at the start of the second half. Montgomery, the running back, who's been a great signing, and certainly an upgrade on Jamal Williams, who went to the Saints and really did nothing there. He fumbled at the start of the second half. Then Goff has an interception and kind of goes away from them. They come back. They get they score 10 points in the last kind of minute and a half, but then they lose the overtime toss, and the Seahawks with Geno Smith go down and score. And you kind of feel, is it going to be like this again? But the following 2 weeks, they had obviously the good win against the Falcons in week 3, where their sort of much lamented defense actually played very well. They went 20-6 comfortably, really, in the end. And then they go to Lambeau, a place again which had haunted Lions fans for, I don't think they had ever won in Lambeau up until 2015. Basically, I think they had 3 decades they hadn't won there. And they have a really good win. It was the Thursday night game. I remember staying up till whatever time it ended, after 4. I played really well in the first half, got out to a big lead, and you tend to think, something might be happening. They're top of the division. They look good. The Vikings are struggling even before Kirk Cousins. Packers are young. Jordan Love doesn't have his great sort of his come good until later in the season, and the Bears are pretty poor. We kind of all think. And then they have another good win in week 5. They beat Tampa Bay. We just obviously beat in the playoffs. And then it all goes a bit pear-shaped when they lose, not just lose to Baltimore in the Sky game, when they're obliterated 30 points to the 6. But the great strength of this Lions team, just to finish maybe at the halfway stage, was their following game was the Monday night game, at Halloween. against the Raiders, and they played reasonably well again to win by, I think, 12 points, 26-14. And again, you got the sense that the team was resilient, built in its kind of the image of its head coach. It's 3 years, I think, this week since the famous sort of introductory biting kneecaps conference, his press conference, and yeah, he has just changed the culture. And when they lose, they tend to bounce back. And just to finish up that sort of long answer, the Lions haven't had a losing streak all season. In the 5 games they've lost, they won the following week, and I think that shows certain resilience. So certainly by the 6-2 stage, you had a feeling that if not this year in terms of winning the NFC North, they would just never do it.
Yeah, but I think that resilience piece is so important, because they were doubted, at times after almost every loss. Like that Ravens loss was so emphatic, and they had been so high flying. I mean, I remember, I think it was that Panthers game, and they were, Ben Johnson was really in his bag of tricks. There was direct snaps to the running back. There was all sorts. And then the Ravens, and I mean, that Ravens defense is absolutely magnificent. But as you said, they bounced back. And then there was later in the season, there was the loss in Chicago, when the Bears were kind of struggling at that point, and a lot of people were saying, the Broncos were high flying. I watched that one on my birthday, and my goodness, the Lions stomped all over us. And did you get to watch the Cowboys game live, Gary?
I did. And I told you the last time I'd been in Cowboy Stadium. I was there in 2018 when the Lions were beaten on a last-second field goal. I think Brett Maher was the kicker then, maybe in his first or second season. In a close game, of course, the Lions, that was Patricia's first year. They had just beaten the Patriots to get their first win of the season. It was the week 4. So the stadium is amazing, as I think I said. Like, you can, on the Jumbotron, you can literally see the sweat of the players. It is like, and I think it's the most extraordinary stadium I've been in, although Lambeau has got a more history, and of course it's outside. But on the second half of the season, so they have a really good win against the Chargers in a kind of a shootout. Those of us who like defense kind of like hold our heads in our hands. The defense for both teams was sort of non-existent. They have a narrow win against the Bears, but they don't play very well, but again score 2 late touchdowns and hold. And before even the Bears defeat was a kind of a very poor defeat to the Packers on Thanksgiving. Now here, this was the night of the Dublin riots, and my daughter happened to be coming home from work, so I kind of like was watching the game, but my heart really wasn't in it. Anyway, she comes home perfectly safe, thankfully. But yeah, they played really poorly. They lose only by 7, but in the game they were never really in. And then what are they at that stage? I think they're 8-3. Yeah, they were 8-2. That would have made them 9-2. They're 8-3. I mean, they were 8-2 for the first time, I think, since the 60s, even before I was born. So they're 9-3. They have a good win against the Saints, and then they lose in Chicago. I was actually in America that weekend visiting my other daughter, who was living in Philadelphia, and that was the weekend the Eagles lost to the Cowboys on the Sunday night game, and you could sense the sort of Eagles fandom getting a little bit antsy, and of course their season subsequently fell apart. But when the Lions lose in Chicago, but again they bounce back, and they bounce back with that big win on the week before Christmas against the Broncos, where they played really well, both offense and defense. And then it's the following week, is before we get to the Cowboys game, Colum, is Christmas Eve, where Sky, for reasons best known to themselves, didn't show the Lions-Vikings game. So I watched it on Game Pass, and I mean, I'm in the room. I watched the game, and I nearly hit the roof at the end when Melifano intercepted the pass from Nick Mullins at 30-24. There's 40 seconds left. The Vikings are on the 40. He throws a kind of a wobbly pass, and Melifano, who was drafted in the 3rd round by Holmes in his first draft, and really didn't do anything in his first 2 years, but it's been very, very good this year. He played really well. He played really well at last weekend as well. And that was just in many ways a surreal moment. Of course, I went on Twitter and rooted around there for an hour, but it's tremendous. I mean, I was, as I said, I've been watching the sport since I was since 1984. Lions have been terrible, lived through all the 0-16, and just, I mean, this time, as Frank Ragnow said after the game on Sunday, like the Lions are usually 2 weeks home at this stage and preparing for yet another high draft pick. And that game against the Vikings, that win in Minnesota, again, a place they struggled to win for years, was, that was very sweet, I have to say. And it brought it then into the Cowboys game. And, the thing about the Cowboys game is, you had a controversial ending, which everybody sort of knows about, and who was eligible or not. Taylor Decker there, if you have longest serving player, the left tackle, or skipper, the person they use on that sort of package. But what struck me about watching that game was they only gave up 20 points. They lost 2019. And the Cowboys had been averaging 40 at home and had blown out a whole host of teams. And it's, the defense has been maligned. They're obviously very poor against the pass. Jefferson, got, I think, 200 yards and 150. CeeDee Lamb got 180 odd that night. Puka Nakua in the playoffs. Mike Evans just last Sunday. So, sorry, that's my dog barking in the background. He's as excited as we are. But the defense has definitely been pretty good. And obviously, then they finish up the season with a good win against Minnesota. And the game I actually had tickets for Christmas, but as it turned out, it wasn't quite feasible to go. But and then we go into the playoffs, and here we are.
Yeah, I mean, I was stateside actually for that Cowboys game, and there was a host of people watching it, none of whom were Lions fans, but everyone pretty outraged at the way in which it played out. Now, sometimes that kind of going against you, especially if you have somebody like that Dan Campbell, who can manage to utilize that to motivate, I suppose. And the fact that I think they would have been prepared to play the Cowboys again, but that wasn't to be. Like when, I mean, and we can come to obviously the game on Sunday, but I mean, I think it's probably we have to acknowledge, as a Lions fan, it obviously, but like what Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have done together, because the draft picks, the fact that it is those players who are making such a difference. And there was a lot of doubt when the picks were made, and not everyone, I suppose. So some of it has been like the guys who've stepped up haven't always been the top picks. Like Brian Branch has been absolutely superb. Sam Laporte has been incredible. Aiden Hutchinson, I think this year has really taken an enormous step forward. Jameson Williams is yet to really deliver on maybe what we expected, though sometimes, you mentioned it earlier, it can take players a couple of years to settle into it. And that's why I think, for me, like the Jack Campbell pick that everyone has been a little down on, I think, especially for the position he plays in, I think they picked for traits there a little bit, and physicality. I think he could well develop into that. And I think what you're seeing this year, I think with the way in which defenses are going with the Ravens and with the 49ers, it's a little bit of a move away, I think, from the Fangio system, the too high. I think the disguise is becoming much more important, and asking your linebackers in that Fangio system. Middle linebackers don't really matter, but in with what Mike McDonald is doing. So I think Brad Holmes, again, a little bit, are certainly in line with the curve. But how pleasing is it to kind of have the younger players be such contributors? I mean, this is kind of Fergie's fledglings type stuff when we talk about Gibbs, Laporta, Branch, Hutchinson, all being, and Penei Sewell. I was listening to Mina Kynes and Dominic Foxworth earlier on today, And Dominic Foxworth said that he felt that Gibbs and Penny Sewell were two of the top five performers in the divisional round.
Yeah, I mean, like the draft is very interesting, of course, because it's like mostly right at the top you hit, like, and you don't hit all the time, and obviously the jury is out on Bryce Young, but the Lions hit with Stafford in 2009, they hit with Ndamukong Suh in 2010 at 1 and 2, but then when you go down into the second, third, fourth rounds, where you have the core of your team going forward, Lions looked horrendous picking on day two for years. And so Holmes comes in. What does he do? He drafts Penei Sewell, I think 7 in the first round, a foundational player, if ever there was one. Just extraordinary athleticism. He's only 23. He's PFF's number one rated tackle in the whole league. He's only given up one sack all year. To the Saints, where I think he might have slipped. He's just an amazing player, and they built in the trenches. Hutchinson, you might remember the Brains just got in trouble with the NFL because they literally picked immediately after the Jaguars picked Tavon Walker. They ran up straight up to pick Hutchinson. Now there was a lot of debate about that pick, and a lot of people thinking Hutchinson wouldn't make a bit undersized. His arms aren't long enough, the usual kind of stuff. But he's got 8 sacks in the last 4 games, and he's amazing. And put it like this: the Lions wouldn't have won, I think, on Sunday without their celebrated rookie class. Gibbs has the most yards. He got that amazing touchdown you see to put the Lions 7 up early in the fourth quarter. Branch has the most tackles, including 2 for a loss. Campbell plays reasonably well, and Laporte has the most catches, 9. And they're all obviously their first and second round picks, but Amon-Ra St. Brown, who got the great catch against the Rams to seal the win last Sunday week, he was picked in the fourth round, and Derek Barnes was also picked in the fourth round in Campbell and Holmes's first draft. And he a player who really didn't do very much again in the first 2 years. And I think a lot of fans obviously were very upset in the Dallas game where he whiffed on sacking Prescott in the end zone for a safety, and Prescott throws it 50 yards, and CeeDee Lamb goes like the distance for a 92-yard touchdown for a sort of a 9-point swing. But he makes that amazing play at the end to seal the win against Tampa Bay. I mentioned Melifonwu, who is really very good as a safety, and he looks like a linebacker, but he's got tremendous sort of ability. And you can have all the sort of flash free agent signings, and God knows the Lions have tried enough of them over the years, most of them which have never worked out. But you know this from watching football as long as I have. You win in the draft, and the best teams are those who draft well and pick carefully in free agency. And I think that's what's happened to the Lions this year. I think in Holmes we trust to certainly. He's certainly proven to be a really shrewd evaluator of talent. Even on Laporta, for instance, when I was doing my sort of homework in the lead up to the draft, everyone wanted Michael Mayer to be drafted. He went just after Laporta to the tight end from Notre Dame, went to the Raiders, and has had a reasonable season, but nothing on the size of Laporta, who again seems like who will have an extraordinary career, I think. And what strikes me about all these players, listening to them and watching the clips on the Lions website and their Twitter channel and whatever, is they all seem tremendously humble. They're all playing clearly for the coach. And you hear lots of teams losing the dressing room. When you only had to look at the Eagles Bucks game, I didn't watch it live at the night game, but I watched the highlights the following day, and they barely looked interested, which was extraordinary for a team in the playoffs. You couldn't imagine a Campbell team or a Holmes team playing like that. And I think that's been the key to this most extraordinary of seasons.
Yeah, I think the other thing alongside the Eagles looking disinterested was just the complete lack of a plan. I mean, the Eagles have had issues with Jalen Hurts being blitzed, and they did nothing to make life easy, whereas the Lions have done, and the Chiefs look to make life easy for Patrick Mahomes at times. You know, you give people an out, you ensure that if there's a problem, you help them to solve it. And the Lions have been so good about doing that with Jared Goff. There are things that Jared Goff is better at than others, and the Lions have looked to solidify where he may have issues. The Eagles did nothing to help Jalen Hurts, it felt. And I think, you know, when coaches aren't doing anything to help players, it's very difficult then to get buy-in, I think, from the players, whereas it's the exact opposite. And it feels like that the Lions have a very definite blueprint when they are drafting, both in terms of what they look for in terms of talent, but also what they look for in terms of character. As you've said, each and every one of those players, when you hear them speak, they are you can imagine them in a locker room being inspired by Campbell. And that brings us, look, to this upcoming game on Sunday, heading into Santa Clara to face a Niners team that looked, like a machine at times over the course of the regular season, but overcame the Packers, but didn't look the dominant machine that maybe we expected. What are
So,
what are your thoughts, like, as we sit here today? We're a couple of days out from the game itself. Hopes and expectations, Gary.
Well, yeah, I think it all depends on maybe again how Goff plays. So the thing on Goff is, everybody who any interest in the sport knows that the idea is that if Goff is pressured, he falls apart. And if you watch the Ravens game in week 7, that's exactly what happened. They just completely swarmed over him. The offensive line had a sort of a bad day at the office, and they were obliterated. And when they lost to the Packers on Thanksgiving, again, the offensive line, with the heartbeat of the team, Sewell at right tackle, Decker at left tackle, and Ragnow, people would have seen him basically on one leg, wincing, and then moving Vea, like this amazing player on the 4th and 1 touchdown for Craig Reynolds, a player who that was the only time he touched the ball in that game, very much the third back. But when Goff is clean, the Lions are good. I mean, he starts off very poor, only 1 for 4, but in the fourth quarter, 15 out of 16 passes, and looked really clued. And I think if the offensive line plays well and Goff plays well, and I don't have any reason to suspect Goff won't play well, I think the Lions definitely have a puncher's chance. Yeah, the 49ers looked amazing all season. Then they had that 3-game sort of losing streak in the middle of the season. They lost to the Browns and the kicker missed, and they looked sorry, and then they looked normal, one might say, and then they came back very strong, and at the end they went the number 1 seed. They rest their starters, and the trouble I think with resting starters and having the number 1 seed is you obviously don't play for 3 weeks, and you miss 2 games, so you don't play for 3 weeks, and they were clearly rusty against the Packers. They lose Deebo Samuel early, so he's a big loss. Purdy doesn't play very well. Looks a bit sort of off. And, some things we take for granted. These great throws, all the quarterbacks can make. But, you've got defenders flying at you. There's everything's going on. And sometimes it's just very easy for good players not to play very well. But they won. The Packers were going great. They had obviously, they beat Detroit comfortably on Thanksgiving. But they had obliterated the Cowboys, who hadn't lost at home since Tom Brady in week 1 of last season. So they went literally 2 seasons undefeated, and the Packers just blew them away. And so I think that was a pretty decent win in the end for the 49ers. And I'd say the test will certainly stand to them. So the line is 7, a full touchdown, which is a lot, but and the teams I think are similarly built, good offensive lines, strong quarterback play, and the 49ers defense maybe is only second to the Ravens. They have, Nick Bosa, a wrecking machine. They're very strong in the linebackers, good at in the back end, where the Lions are very poor. Obviously, Lions just giving up these huge plays. In one way, I thought they looked really comfortable last Sunday night, except they gave up that touchdown just before halftime, and Mike Evans had two big receptions down the end. The coup the week before for the Rams. So I think the Lions have a puncher's chance. They've been good away. They've been good away this season. They've lost. They were 6-3. They lost away to Chicago. They lost to Baltimore, and they lost to Dallas. But they barely lost to Dallas, as we know, and probably all us people in Lions fandom feel we were jobbed by the refs yet again. But yeah, I think they have a punch. I would be surprised, again, having watched the sport for so long and just looking at this team and looking at the 49ers, I would be surprised if it was a blowout. I don't think the Lions, beyond the Baltimore game, have been pretty competitive. And I think they, just checking on Twitter and Vivid Seats, that they expect a fifth of the stadium will be Lions fans. Apparently, 22% of the tickets sold are to people from Detroit or following the Lions. So I think you might see a lot of blue, and that's been a pattern from Kansas City in week one to Dallas right at the end of the season, that the Lions and their long-suffering supporters have are traveled this year. So they should. What did I say? A puncher's chance, I think. And I never thought the Lions would ever get to a Super Bowl. So I fingers crossed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. I think what I think could be a key matchup though is the 49ers have an incredibly talented starters in particular. I mean, you look at it, and obviously Christian McCaffrey is so dangerous. George Kittle is fantastic. Trent Williams is going to go to the Hall of Fame. Debo is sensational. To me, their linebackers are like Fred Warner and Greenlaw. Just make so much happen on defense. But if Kyle Shanahan, who is a fantastic coach, he's a brilliant offensive mind, the way he schemes things up, the way he's a magpie, and you see him take the best ideas from others and try and use them throughout the season. And like he every single week he's out and cherry picking the best plays and making them his own. But if he has a weakness, it is that he tends to turtle a little bit in the playoffs. He goes conservative. You saw it at the end of the first half against the Packers. And I think Dan Campbell is very smart, and he is consistent in that he tends to roll the dice. And I think in order for the Lions to win this, they are going to need turnovers. They are going to need the bounce of the ball. They are going to have to create, I suppose, a little bit of chaos to take advantage of the 49ers. When the Ravens, got that win over the 49ers earlier this season, that's how they went about it, was to create a little bit of chaos. Because if you allow the 49ers to play the way they want to play, and allow them to dictate terms, well, they're very happy for you to do that. I think they do have a puncher's chance. To me, the 49ers are favorites. They're at home. They have the talent, but I see a path. I can see a path that the Lions get there. And like the talk about long suffering, like we talk about, like Buffalo has its own, tragedy in terms of you go to 4 Super Bowls and you lose them and you haven't been able to get there. But Detroit, so long suffering. And Ford Field, I can only imagine what it was like to be there. I mean, you could feel the atmosphere come through the TV screen. I can only imagine. Like I imagine the number of people who are going to have tinnitus as a result of the Lions playoff run in 2020. The 2023 season will be quite something. So I've
been in Ford Field 4 times. From as way far back as January 2010, Stafford's first season. He got injured in that famous game against the Browns, where his shoulder was dislocated, but he still threw a touchdown right on the 1 yard line. They go 2-14. They draft Sue the following year, and then I think I told you I was at the Chiefs game a few years ago. Saw them against the Eagles, the Panthers another time, and it's kind of it's not a modern stadium. It's over 20 odd years old, but it's when the crowd is on top of things and is loud, it's an extraordinary place. But that atmosphere looked amazing. I mean, for the Lions to win on Sunday, Colum, I think they'll have to get ahead. I suspect if Campbell wins the toss, he'll take the ball and he'll try and score. This is what they did against the Rams. They marched down the field. They obviously scored 3 touchdowns on their first 3 drives. It's the exact opposite last Sunday against the Bucks. They get the ball first, but they sort of go 3 and out. No, they recover. But I think if you go down to the 49ers, and you give a touchdown and then you go 3 and out, and even if they get a field goal, if you're 10 down halfway through the first quarter, it could easily just flit away. But there is, I think, enormous pressure on the 49ers, like being favourites, being the sort of team that everyone expected to get to the Super Bowl at the start of the season. And then the last couple of NFC Championship games, obviously last year when Purdy got injured and the backup got injured, and that game just kind of petered out. The year before against the Rams when they lose, so they're under. I think they're under significant pressure. If the Lions get ahead at all, you'd have to think they might, like basically what the Packers did last week. Packers got ahead and then they ran the ball. Aaron Jones had, what did he have, 150 yards or so for the Packers, and the Lions with their 2-headed monster. They'd like to run Montgomery early and try and gain hard yards, and then you see Gibbs, who is really, really electrifying. He just seems, he's not. There'll never be another Barry Sanders, but I think Barry Sanders would have been proud of that touchdown run, that 31-yard run Sunday, where he jukes up the middle, feints one way, and then goes the other way, and just leaves poor Antoine Winfield, who's a really brilliant safety, as you know, for dust. And that pick, the 12th pick, no one picks a running back anymore so high because running backs get injured. They barely last 3 years. They take, and none of them are so good to be generational. What is Brad Holmes doing? Well, it turns out they're paying him all these millions in Detroit because he seems to know what he's doing. And what heartens me, no matter the result on Sunday, I think the Lions are playing with a little bit of house money, as the saying goes. But you would expect the you can't say the success to continue, but you would expect them to be competitive, certainly over the next 3 to 4 years. Now, I think the Bears will be better, and we'll see what they do with the first-round pick. Will they trade it and keep Fields, or will they draft Caleb Williams, where all the talk is about? The Packers clearly look as if they're getting their act together. Who knows with Minnesota and what they're going to do with Kirk Cousins? But the division is going to be better. But I don't think, I would hope the days of, by November you're wondering who the Lions will draft next year are over for the foreseeable future. A win obviously would be, it would be extraordinary, really.
And just I'll get you out of here on this one. On the other side of things, on the AFC side, who do you see emerging victorious to head to the Super Bowl on that side?
I think the Ravens will win. So they have home advantage, obviously, but they have that extraordinary defense. Even watching them against the Texans on Saturday night, the offense is very slow to start. It's 10-all at halftime, but the Texans' touchdown was on that punt return, and they just shut everything down in the second half. The Chiefs, we're worried about the Chiefs is that this is a down year in one way statistically, and yet here they are again. And you talked about Buffalo and the sort of the wide right haunting from all that way back in 1991, haunting the poor kicker Tyler Bass last Sunday night. The Chiefs just seem to have the Bills number, but the Ravens have been so good all season, and once Lamar heated up in the second half, and I think they might just have enough. But I mentioned Mahomes on this podcast before as just a generational talent, and once you have him at quarterback, the Chiefs will have a chance. And the other thing is the Chiefs have a very good defense themselves, and we saw how they limited Stephon Diggs for the Bills, and how they kept you're never going to keep Josh Allen quiet all the time, but their defense is legit as well. So I think it might be relatively low scoring in these affairs, but I think, and if the Ravens don't win, I think they will see it as a lost season. It's been such a fantastic season for them, and I was only seeing, I think they've won 10 of their games by over 2 touchdowns. Which in the NFL, where most of the games go down to the last sort of, the last play or two, is just really, really amazing. And they've blown out some really good teams, including the Lions, who are in the last four. So yeah, so maybe a Baltimore Detroit Super Bowl. Who would have thunk that back in September?
Well, if the Lions do make it, I can only imagine the price of Super Bowl tickets.
Well, I checked. Yeah, just before I came on, I was on Twitter and I checked. There were some tweets from some of the beat writers in Detroit and on Vivid Seats. It's $300 more to go to San Francisco than Baltimore. I think the cheapest ticket is something in the region of about $700, and it's $400 in Baltimore. It's it's all legal, of course, in the United States. This is how fans get their tickets on the secondary market, and a lot of people are sort of waiting to see will the price go down. But I suspect the price, even for this game, is only going to go up. And then, as you could say, what would it be like for a Super Bowl? And yeah, and I mean, Detroit's a really interesting place. I mean, there's been a lot of sort of, I think, just to finish up, there's been a lot of like misplaced commentary in the national US media that the Lions are rejuvenating the city. The city has been rejuvenated from its sort of very bad reputation of a couple of decades ago. They've done an awful lot of work in the inner city. It's a place I know well and visited, as I said, a few times. But and they're one of the few American cities to have the four main sports. Obviously, the Pistons are terrible this year. The Red Wings and the hockey, and the Tigers and the baseball haven't been good for a while. But it's really a football town, and when an NFL, when the city gets behind an NFL franchise, good things can happen. So, on that note, we'll say go Lions.
Gary, thanks for taking the time to join me. Enjoy the game on Sunday in as much as that is possible. I'm sure there'll be excitement and nervous tension as well. But I appreciate you taking the time to chat to me this evening.
Thanks so much for having me, Colum.